Morning and welcome to yet another edition of the 359 Podcast, episode 575 on Thursday, June 20th? 21st? 20th. Hey, I figured it out eventually. My name's BBG. You're joining us at our New York studios for our daily live news podcast that will soon be moving to an all-new channel. We'll tell you all about that later on in the show. For now, here's your host, Roger Cheng, and I as Akhtar.
Hello.
Howdy. Good day to you.
Happy Thursday.
It is Thursday the 20th.
The 21st or the 20th?
I think it's, let me think about it. 20th.
Yeah?
That's why I have it in my menu bar.
All right. Well, sorry, we're starting off in a weird way, but we're going into some really dense
for the
topics.
course, Roger.
I know. We're going into some dense topics, so it's the levity is appropriate, I guess, to kind of kick us off. We're going to be talking about whether or not 5G is, whether there are health risks of 5G. We'll be talking about YouTube and Google's YouTube facing regulatory scrutiny and what it might do to its YouTube Kids app. And lastly, all right, maybe not as dense, pizza and AI. It's going to be awesome.
Depends if you're getting Detroit style or New York style.
That's a great question. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. Brian will pick out the best, and we'll get them in 3 minutes and 59 seconds.
Starting in 3, 2...
Welcome to the 359. I'm Roger Cheng.
I'm Ayaz Akhtar.
5G promises to radically change our lives, giving us lightning-fast connection and potentially powering everything around us. But there's always been a lingering concern about 5G and cellular signals in general, and it's really the concern about whether or not this stuff is actually dangerous. After all, it uses higher frequency radio airwaves. 5G in particular will require a lot more cell towers around you. That's making people really nervous. So we had our own Maggie Reardon break down this issue, and well, it's complicated. Technically, all of this is radiation. Really, any heat that we give off is considered radiation. But cell signals, including 5G, don't fall into that spectrum of harmful radiation that would actually break down your cells, something you'd find with an X-ray or in a nuclear power plant. And so no studies found a direct link between cell phones and cancer or reduced fertility or any other kind of health issues. But, and there's a big but, is that the World Health Organization sort of left open the possibility that RF signals are carcinogenic, and critics say that there just haven't been enough adequate studies to prove that link.
I mean, it's science. So, you need a lot of studies. You need to have different variables taken out of the equation. You can't just be like, okay, all we're going to do is you're going to be subject to 5G waves as opposed to Wi-Fi, microwaves, or any of those other items, or even other people who are radiating heat. So there's lots of different factors on this. So it's just flat out science. It's going to take a lot of time to figure this out. By the time it's figured out, 6G will be here.
Right. So and I think that's the big problem. I think this is an issue we've had with cell phone service in general. Is we don't have a 5G network to test this on. By the time we do have the network to get those adequate tests, we're already years into 5G exposure, and everyone sort of moved on, right? And so, yeah, there really isn't. Sorry to say, there isn't a clear answer as to whether or not it's dangerous. We only know that it might be.
Yeah,
but maybe not.
I'm leaning towards probably as dangerous as 4G.
Right.
Maybe not.
Right. Assuming 4G is dangerous, that's the thing.
Right.
No studies have really conclusively linked 4G to anything. And so, again, I said the World Health Organization has left that open, calls it a potentially carcinogenic material, but they also say coffee and pickled vegetables.
And I've also heard burnt ends can be carcinogens. There's all kinds of different things that can be related to cancer, or at least be connected to it.
Right. Next up, YouTube may face fines from an investigation by the Federal Trade Commission. According to the Washington Post, YouTube is already reconsidering changing big elements of the service, including the algorithm that recommends what you watch next. It's part of this bigger debate and scrutiny over how it manages its content and what the balance is between freedom of speech versus potentially harmful content.
Yeah, in this particular case, it's talking about the COPA law, where it comes to collecting data from children under 13 without parental consent. The FTC had an issue with TikTok. TikTok did Musical.ly, and they actually settled for a fine of $5.7 million, which at the time was the largest fine that would be settled if the FTC is looking into YouTube and they have to figure out some kind of settlement, assuming there's some kind of violation of this law.
Yep.
This kind of settlement might be very, 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 very large.
Yes. I mean, 5.7 is a drop in the bucket for YouTube. Obviously, TikTok's a smaller company. It's probably a bigger blow for them. But yeah, you can imagine this fine would be a lot more significant. Lastly, an MIT study out says that it can use AI to figure out how a pizza is made. Can you break down how this would even work?
Yeah. So with this, it's using neural networks, and what it does is taking this giant collection of images of pizzas from Instagram. What this tool can do is it can deconstruct a pizza from layer to layer to layer to layer. So it can figure out the topping, the cheese, the sauce, and the way the actual crust was cooked. So that seems a little bit nuts, and I was looking into what other applications there are. In the study, they mentioned this could be good for salads, hamburgers, sandwiches, but other applications outside of food would be digital fashion shopping assistants. So figuring out, hey, what's that shirt under that blazer? Or what's that T-shirt you're wearing under that shirt?
Scary, but also useful.
Potentially.
All right, for more of these stories, check us out on CNET. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Ayaz Akhtar.
Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think having AI and robots in charge of food is far more dangerous than 5G.
It's not in charge of. It's a tool that we use.
I don't care. We've gone from neural networks making the Terminator a reality, and now you're putting it in charge of my food.
Put a lens cap on the camera. It can't do smack about it.
Well, no, it's really just a step towards robots making our food, right? You get the AIs, you break down the recipe, and you can tell the robots to go make the food.
Well, I mean, if you have the recipe, can you just send it to the cook bot?
Yeah, well, yeah. I guess.
You don't need to have a picture of it unless, like, look, I
well,
saw
no,
this thing on
unless
Instagram.
it's on the street. Like, I just look at that pizza. It looks really amazing. I'm just gonna snap a photo.
According to that study, on Instagram, pizza is the most photographed food out there.
Is it really?
That's what this study
I
said.
would have guessed sushi.
That's not surprising.
I would have guessed sushi.
Really?
Visually, it's interesting.
Yeah, but not as many people like
Yeah,
sushi.
that's-
Pretty much
yeah.
everybody
Ubiquitous.
eats pizza.
I know, but like, why would you take a photo of pizza? Like, people eat pizza all the time. What's the point?
Exactly.
But see, that's the thing. So
have you
imagine
a
been on
small percentage.
Instagram?
I know.
Just a small percentage of everyone is posting these images. So.
I will say, I'm on Instagram a fair amount. I don't see that many pizza shots in my feed.
You could look up #pizza then.
No, that's true.
That's how they got their pictures.
Just because you don't see
I
it
know,
doesn't
maybe
mean
my
it doesn't
algorithms
exist.
are just like very anti-pizza, so.
Got a safe little like walled off zone there, Roger.
It's a pizza-free
No
zone, my Instagram
pizza.
feed. I love pizza, though. That's the weird thing. Like, it'd be okay if I saw some.
I'm curious about how many photos will come up on Instagram.
Okay, so it's time to go ahead and send in questions and comments about today's topics. There's plenty of conversation to be had about 5G. We're all on the same train here. We're all just kind of figuring out as we go. It's an interesting thing to follow, and there's a couple of people pointing out some things I hadn't even thought about. So Matilda is very vocal about 5G has got to be safe because it's been in 20 cities for months and people don't have cancer there yet.
Well, keep in mind. Even if there was some sort of linkage, you probably wouldn't see the effects of this stuff for years. So it's not like
exactly, and she follows that up just to her credit.
Okay, good. Because that's the thing. Like, I think everyone wants to see some sort of smoking gun, but the frustrating part of all this is like we probably won't see the effects of even traditional 4G LTE stuff for years, right? Like this stuff stays like it's very subtle. It's very if it is a health risk, this stuff wouldn't pop up for a while, and partly because we're not really actively looking for it, right?
That's part of it for sure. Taking another question, who do we want to look at today? Here's one from Craig, and this is a thought that I had not had yet. Does the radiation and the radio waves being emitted, could that have any effect on things like air traffic control? I hadn't even thought about that one yet.
Unlikely, because I mean, there's no way this would be even cleared if it was going to cause an issue with that, because this is using a millimeter wave wavelength, which is supposed to be very different.
It's very short distance,
right? And that's one of the reasons why the networks have to be so large, because they don't travel that well.
Exactly.
So there's a lot more
build out a
infrastructure.
lot more of these cell towers or small cells.
So they're probably not going to go straight up into nowhere. It's probably more directed, I'd imagine.
Right. I mean, keep in mind, especially airplanes in the sky. I mean, there's hardly, unless they've got the ones that offer Wi-Fi, they've got some sort of antenna in there, but there's no cell signals up there to really interfere with.
Right, there's a certain height on that.
Yeah.
That's why I think GoGo, there's a story that GoGo will be bringing 5G to commercial airlines next year, I want to say. And that will be a very specialized use case, because otherwise you can't just get a signal up there.
Right, it'd have to have some sort of antenna or microwave dish anchored onto the plane to actually capture the signal.
All right. So now that we're talking about it, you mentioned the radiation of 5G. What is the radiation of 5G? I'm gonna see if I can pull that graphic back up.
What is the radiation of 5G?
What is the radiation level?
Oh, this. That's a little bit unclear. What the like? I know there's a SAR or specific absorption rate level, but I'm not entirely sure what the.
So we're looking at where it lands in the
Oh, yeah, there it
electromagnetic spectrum here, and it's hovering. What just happened? Oh, I knocked my headphones out. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I
Yes.
can hear you.
There we go. So what it's landing in is somewhere near the 30 gigahertz emission level there. Do you have any elaboration
30
on it?
gigahertz is the. I believe that's the frequency of the spectrum. But yeah, but if you sort of see it, it's categorized as what's known as a non-ionizing
Radiation.
and so that's the that's the level of radiation that isn't harmful to your cells or doesn't cause a breakdown of your cells, which would lead to cancer.
Exactly.
You know what causes cancer? The sun. I mean,
That's
Everything?
True. It's right up there.
I
It's
mean,
right
it's,
at the
it's
edge.
really important. They got this thing that gives us warmth. It's like, I'm also trying to kill you.
Yeah. Well, there's a give and take there, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Tons and tons of more great questions and comments flooding in. I'm trying to filter through them right now.
While you're doing that, by the way, there's over 39 million posts on Instagram with hashtag pizza.
There you go.
39.9 million.
That was-
Looking up 5G was a lot less than that.
That was important to know. Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
5G is only at
Well,
187,000 posts.
well,
Hashtag.
that makes sense, right? How do you take a photo of 5G? The radio airwaves.
Well, you could just say
The cell
I
tower?
have the Samsung 5G, whatever the heck
Or
it was
the
called.
phone-
I have the Moto
the
5G.
Galaxy S10 5G or the Moto Mod 5G.
That's correct. Or maybe a jetpack.
How many people actually own one of those things?
Apparently
Come on, let's-
187,000.
I don't think they all own that. I think that you can still tag something without owning the product.
I don't know,
so-
man. That doesn't sound right. Actually, the first couple of ones are actually about the speed tests.
Oh, yeah, that makes
And
sense.
Vivo, and this is a
They're probably from our own Jessica Delcourt, Lynn Law.
right. She did 200,000 posts of her own. I thought.
She did do a lot.
Speaking of speeds, what is the equivalent speed of, say, a standard regular Joe usage of 5G? Is it pretty much on par with a lot of home Wi-Fi speeds?
Oh, faster at this point. Keep in mind it's an early days deployment. So if you're able to tap into a 5G network, you're probably the only one on there. So you get like the whole highway to yourself. But think 1 to 2 gigs a second. That is 2 gigs is twice as fast as the fastest home connection available. That's via Google Fiber. So Google Fiber is technically it's a little bit less than 1 gig per second, and 5G can top that.
And one of the things about 5G is supposed to be more robust. So if you have more and more devices on the network, it
Yep.
can withstand that. That's one of the issues with LTE because I don't believe at the time when it was being created that the Internet of Things or cars being connected all the time was even an option. At this point, since every device, your watch, your headphones might even have it, these kinds of connections are going to put a load on the network.
Yep.
And 5G is way better at handling that.
Yeah, the idea here is that the network's smart enough to like know that, say, that microwave that needs
Doesn't need a
connection.
gig.
Wait, exactly. It needs like a little bit here, and your cell phone needs a certain amount here, but your TV with an 8K connection, 8K video stream needs a huge amount of bandwidth, and it'll actually be smart enough to divvy out speeds based on the usage.
All right, still filtering through a lot of these questions and comments. Thanks everybody for joining us and for sending in such great conversation. Here's one from Timothy. Is there any news on carriers already developing a cap on 5G?
Yes, so AT&T has put a cap on unofficially, I believe, that they're going to offer a 2 gig cap on speeds.
For like the most basic plan, I assume, or is this for
No,
everything?
I think that's just the policy. Like it's a
Wait,
weird fine print
2
thing.
gigabit per second, 2 gigabytes of usage per month.
Not usage, just speed usage.
Oh, the speed.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no data cap. Or
That's the part.
no data. Yeah, no data cap as we know of. There's a speed cap, which is kind of a ridiculously high speed cap. I think they just put it out there so they can sort of humble brag that they can get up to 2 gigabits per second. But in terms of actual data consumption, no, I don't think there are firm policies yet on that because it's just again there are so few customers on.
Yeah, in theory, these are also supposed to be alternatives to home broadband. I think Verizon's supposed to be building that out.
Yes.
So to have data caps would be kind of strange.
Well, it's sort of two different things, right? Like the traditional cell phone service is 5G is a traditional cell phone service is its own thing, and they kind of are trying to partition out the home broadband service as its own separate thing. Like Verizon will market like 5G broadband or 5G home as a separate service that you have to pay for. So it's not like you combine the two.
Right, but that also opens up a ton of alternatives for people like us in Manhattan, where you can't get, oh, you want to switch cable providers? No. You want to switch internet providers? Good luck. You can go to, my options include Spectrum and DSL.
There you go.
That doesn't get much better than that. So I'm hoping that these wireless networks to the home will be very, very just robust enough to handle
and
all
these
this.
companies, Verizon and T-Mobile in particular, have talked about the opportunity that comes with hooking homes up to 5G, which, yeah, if it means like fewer installers coming in and like stomping over my apartment to hook everything up,
Drilling holes.
all the better.
More questions and comments. Let's take one from our old friend Yan Hao Chen. What is the range of 5G? I remember it's like 100 meter radius or something like that, and way smaller than 4G, so you need a lot more 5G stations. So if 5G is remotely harmful, it could be disastrous if they start putting up more towers. And that is followed up by Kel, who is asking if we're going to need at least twice the amount of cell towers out there to support 5G widespread network. Now, that is one thing to be mindful of, is that there's going to be a lot more installations out there, way more than twice.
So yeah, it's a slightly complicated answer. Currently, the network deployments that are going on right now with Verizon, AT&T, and even T-Mobile, they're using what's known as millimeter wave spectrum, which, as I pointed out earlier, very short range. Just requires a lot more cell towers or small cells, and as Brian said, it's going to be way more than twice as money. Like, it's going to be basically like
every few
everywhere.
blocks.
Like if they want to cover everything, it's going to require a massive amount of cell towers. The only thing is, most of these carriers are moving on to lower frequency spectrum. T-Mobile has already talked about using their 600 megahertz spectrum, which is way lower frequency, which means longer distance, which means requiring fewer cell towers. So I think the future, and you're seeing this around the world too. There's a term called sub-6, or spectrum that is lower than 6 gigahertz, which is lower than the crazy high spectrum being used by Verizon and AT&T right now. That would have longer range, require fewer cell towers, and so that's kind of that's really the ultimate game plan. It's sort of a mixture of these different kinds of bandwidth or bands of spectrum. So you'll have a few of these super fast hotspots in densely populated areas like here in New York or in SF. But really, like in the suburbs or elsewhere, you're going to see more the use of lower frequency spectrum, which has a lot better range. So it's not the nightmare scenario where like everywhere we go we'll be surrounded by cell towers is probably not true, because it's just not economically feasible. But it is true, like in the city, you will probably see more of a denser deployment of this network.
All right, here's a good one from Raid. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but Roger, this is going to be right in your wheelhouse. What else beyond speed is coming with 5G? I get it, tech moving forward, but anything else than the speed aspect of it that 5G is going to bring to the table?
Yeah, we already talked about so the ability to handle different devices. Latency is the other big thing. That's the kind of lag time between when you like ping your phone and when it talks to the network and gets back to you. There's always like, I don't know, a millisecond or so, or even more, like several milliseconds of delay. With 5G, it gets cut down to almost nothing. So like you have like a true real-time responsive network, and that's really great for self-driving cars. If cars want to talk to each other, you can't have any lag time. You know, the most dramatic example is remote surgery, like being able to control like a robot arm when you're in New York, the patient is in SF. Needing to have that actual real-time connection is critical for something like that.
I think I saw one of the demos was virtual reality. So when you tilt your head,
oh yeah.
So instead of having a lag, so you're looking here and then you move right, and then it takes a second for it to understand that you move right. It's supposed to be a lot more capable of handling these quick movements, which sounds nuts if you think about it. But virtual reality, wirelessly, fully wirelessly, I don't think I want to do it, but you could do it with this kind of thing.
VR. We've talked about VR video chat, being able to kind of like live stream the actual VR experience between two people across different distances. 5G would definitely enable that with the latency and the speed. You'd actually be able to kind of talk to someone in the same VR experience, and there wouldn't be any lag.
I'm really curious about with all these different bandwidths, or wavelengths, when it comes to antenna technology, will this, when you go from one band to the next, is that going to make an issue on battery life or not? Because I'm really curious about that, because anytime you add in radios, you're talking about killing a battery.
Yep. That's a fantastic question. I would say probably. That's why you see a lot of those early phones being a lot bigger, carrying a bigger battery pack. I think that's going to be necessary for a little while. Obviously, over time, I think that gets solved.
To be figured out.
But the like Qualcomm, for instance, has this chip coming out. It's called the X55 modem. It's supposed to handle different bands within one chip, so theoretically, it's a little bit more power efficient.
So it's Qualcomm to the rescue.
All right, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to address a comment coming in from one of our friends and coworkers here. I'm going to leave him nameless because I know that he kind of secretly watches the show when he's supposed to be working. But he knows who he is. He says, apparently the install for 5G isn't that bad. It's like a kit that they install on top of the current towers and other locations like telephone poles and buildings. But instead of having like traditional towers, there are these little boxes, little devices that they just kind of plant there, and then they relay the signals.
Thank you,
Anonymous
coworker. Well-informed coworker. That's true. They're called small cells. They are a lot smaller. They can get strung up everywhere. I mean, you've seen them. You're starting to see them like on light poles and just sort of like street lamps. So like really, they're theoretically supposed to be a lot more compact and less visually ugly. But there's still sort of a movement among smaller towns to kind of to kick some of them out because they just don't want them strung everywhere around their neighborhood. It kind of ruins the aesthetics of the neighborhood. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. And to the point about like sort of the upgrades to existing towers, I know carriers like T-Mobile, like AT&T, they've been future-proofing some of their networks. So some of the cell towers are already kind of built with 5G enabled boxes that they could basically turn on with a software upgrade.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Tons and tons of comments still flooding in. Let's try to slam out one or two more before we shut things down for the week. Let's take one from Ryan. We'll swing things over to YouTube conversation. He says, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little nervous when my daughter eventually finds her way onto YouTube, but the same could be said for any social network. It's just a matter of how well-informed you and your family are. So with this YouTube thing, I get the irony of me stating this here while we're online, but it's a cesspool. As I sit here and ban a couple of people in the chat for some select language, it's a weird place to be. I can't even imagine being in a situation where I'm responsible for raising a well-adjusted human being and thinking like, yeah, YouTube should be applied to that mix.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of using YouTube here and there. Like we'll pull up videos of like trains or something, something fairly innocuous, but really the trick is like not letting it go on, because I think once you hit autoplay, that's when things get kind of weird. So I use YouTube very sparingly with my kid at least, but it's I watch it plenty.
Yeah, my son's on an age-restricted version of it because he's got controls on his iPad, and even the children, things that are approved for kids can be extremely irritating. There's always like people screaming, and they're just because kids can handle that, and I can't.
Well, there's also stuff that's inappropriate that gets by the filters.
Well, regardless of that, I'm just talking about the stuff that's appropriate. Sometimes is just really annoying to overhear. So, whether or not it's a cesspool, I think that's kind of.
Yeah, I mean, this is I guess the kids spectrum of YouTube is less cesspool and more annoying. Yes,
but it's not impenetrable, as we have seen.
But on the
that's true.
On the plus side, because maybe it's like all even keeled, because we're all these kids that are growing up now have to deal with the same stuff. So it'd be like, hey, maybe they'll all turn into these narcissistic picture taking people who scream all the time and want to put themselves on YouTube while violating a federal law.
That sounds like a success as a parent right there.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Parents dream.
And in the grand finale, we'll talk pizza. CKT says, what's after 5G AI making my food? When's it going to chew it up and feed it to me like a mama bird?
Ooh. I don't know.
Well, let me think about this. I'd say.
I mean, they could probably sell it in liquid form for you at some point. So
if I'm waking, where's there no like pizza pill? That should be a thing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's already Soylent. I like my meal replacements, but why
is
it be so thick?
a Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory, the little piece of candy that tastes like a meal.
That
like
would
Thanksgiving
work. As
meal.
long as it actually had like the full nutrition with it, though.
I don't
Pizza's
know.
not
They didn't
nutritious.
discuss that
I need the
part. It's
calories.
just the taste.
All right.
You got the experience of the Thanksgiving meal in like one little tablet.
Well, actually, if it had no calories, you get a diet Thanksgiving.
There you go.
Thanksgiving 0.
Yeah, you
There
get the
it is.
experience without all the
the
calories. I love it.
Now I just want a Thanksgiving pizza. Question for the road coming in at the 11th hour here. What do you imagine 6G is going to be used for? Already jumping the gun.
Are we already talking about 6G?
We are.
8K video on the fly.
I mean, 8K video is going to be 5G. I mean, I don't
I just
know.
think it's going to be
6G. Who knows?
so 8K VR.
Here's the thing: we didn't really know what 4G was going to be used for when 4G was launching, and we don't really know what 5G will ultimately be used for, because I think a lot of the killer apps that we want haven't been invented yet. And so looking into 5G is difficult enough. 6G, who knows?
6G just means always on live streaming by people who have devices that never stop streaming
God. So battery life,
with a backpack.
like infinite battery life on 6G.
that might
That's
be
what I
it. Maybe
want.
maybe there's some kind of like perfect one that goes through all concrete and trees and everything. and handle it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's really the next iteration of this.
that frequency that would actually be able to drill. Well, that's
It was television.
yeah.
Television had the
We have
frequency.
all that.
We had it, and,
Yeah.
and companies been trying to buy it, and everyone's like, "No, you can't have the TV spectrum because
They have some of it though. They got plenty
they
of
need
it.
we need more.
Yeah.
The bit rate you can get though.
Part of the problem is the frequency is so slow, it's so low that like the connection speeds are always slow with that.
But you can get a 30 megabits per second video, which is that's a Blu-ray quality, folks. If you're wondering about that,
All
which
right,
is
there you go.
over the air. With an antenna. It was
Maybe
amazing.
6G just goes back to like physical rabbit ears. That would be
It was an
awesome.
antenna, that'd be great, right there. That's the
Here's
future.
my 6G right there.
Okay, so we are done for the day. We are done for the week. But before we go, for those of you who maybe missed the big announcement yesterday, the show is moving. We are going to get our own channel. So starting on July 1st, you can find us over at what's going to be called The Daily Charge. It's a YouTube channel. It's up now. You can go to this link right here in the description. Link down below, here on the screen, tinycc/Daily Charge. Same show. We're going to be working in some new stuff eventually. There might be some changes coming down the road. Just trying to enhance the show, try some new things, get more interactive with you guys, new segments, maybe some call-ins. We'll see where the road takes us, but it's been a really engaging and fun and interesting and educational 3 years getting up to this point. We're excited to start our own channel. CNET likes us that much, I guess. And you'll be able to continue to find the episodes over there starting on July 1st. But all the other episodes, these past almost 600, remain on the CNET YouTube channel. But going forward, we hope that you'll join us over on the new Daily Charge channel, where we're just going to be doing more of the same. Roger?
All right, 359 podcast is available on iTunes. Tune in Google Play Music, Google Podcast, the Amazon Echo, of course, CNET.com. See you all next week.
Bye, folks. Have a great weekend.
Oh, I'm actually going to fall.